We're opening up the Peacock and Williamson mailbag as we do weekly. Jamar Chase, why aren't we talking about this holdout, which is getting critical? Is Drake London a wide receiver one, the Seahawks staff, and a whole lot more coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to this podcast. Even those everydayers out there, see, a lot of you aren't subscribed, so make sure you are subscribed up here to Peacock and Williamson. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, let's get into this thing. We got a question here in the mailbag, and at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL on Twitter, or in the YouTube comments is where you can always drop a question here. We do our mailbags every Wednesday. We will throughout this football season as well. Katie says, which holdout or hold in are you most worried about affecting their performance on the field once they are signed?
Yeah, so we've talked Ayuk to death. We've talked a lot of CD Lamb. I really want to concentrate on Jamar Chase on this one because, first of all, he's a little bit bold asking for one a year early. You know, I mean, he has 2 years left on his deal. Not to mention, they can control his contract for 6 years with a fifth-year option and a franchise tag. And not that I'm harping on his boldness. Good for him. He's a great player. You know, people are getting paid, receivers are getting paid. Good for you. But you're doing business with the Bengals, and that's what gives me pause. And we talked about this in a little bit. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just saying, read the room.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we talked about this a little on Locked On Dynasty this morning, but I recently saw the net worth of all 32 owners, and I didn't fact check it. I mean, I don't know this to be true, but let's just say the Brown family's at the very bottom. And I think they're getting by. I think they can pay the electric bill. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think they'll be just fine. But going back to Carson Palmer in my whole lifetime, they've been the ownership you don't want to tangle with in this situation because they will wait you out and they just don't bend at all. I mean, T. Higgins just found this out. Hendrickson just found this out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that Chase is, I mean, maybe he's special. I mean, he's not a quarterback, and I just don't want to tangle with the Browns. You know what I mean? This could be a real butting of heads.
Yeah, and I get it with Jamar Chase, and he probably feels like, you know, he saw Waddle and Smith get their deals done from that first round. But,
sure,
you know, that's 2021 first round class. The 2020 guys, though, haven't even signed yet, or at least a couple of them in CD Lamb and Brandon Ayuk. So he's a year behind those guys. And to be honest with you, I think he maximizes his money if he signs this next year instead of this year anyway.
Was thinking that as well.
These extensions, like the Waddle and Smith extensions, start after their fifth year options anyway. So you're doing it early. Like, could Waddle, and especially if you're the number one guy, and you know you always want to be back from injury if you can, and get a deal whenever you can. But the timing does feel a little bit more odd with Jamar Chase. And I think with all the wide receivers, whether it's Ayuk, Chase, or CD Lamb, I think developing that rapport with your quarterback is pretty important versus some other positions like Trent Williams is holding out. And he's, you know, he's 35 years old, and he can walk in with
better around the block. Yeah, he's still going to block people.
The
right.
Timing of the offense and maybe missing some things. And I think, you know, with Ayuk, he's holding in, so he's kind of around meetings. So maybe he would have a little better idea of what's been installed, and maybe if there's other things that are changing beyond what was happening that they already know about as far as installs in the offense. And look, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have been playing together for a while. So does that make that less of a deal versus Ayuk and Lamb, who are missing practice time? So all that is to be said that I think it does hurt wide receiver quarterbacks potentially more than any other position, just because of the timing and what's involved with everybody being on the same page in an offense, especially in an offense that's, got its roots in being a more of a timing based system.
It's not my dollars. I'm not the one writing the check, but I would think if you're the Bengals, you would look at this as Higgins is going to go. We can't afford to lose Chase or Burrow. Everyone else we can replace or, work on, but those two are going to be our foundation forever. So wouldn't you want to do it now, to your point? Because Chase is only going to get more and more expensive. I'm not worried about durability. And when I say it's not my money, when I say it's not my money, I mean, all that guaranteed money goes in escrow. And, that's why I bring it up. Yeah.
It's not just that, you have to pay this guy $30 million in 2 years. It's that you have to pay all the guarantees right now and put it in escrow.
Right. So it's not yours,
So there's a lot of money that you pony up. And so maybe you're just not prepared. And so maybe they're just like, look, we're not in a position to put that money in escrow right now. So
I assume there's a chunk for Burrow as we speak.
Right. And so you've already done one with a quarterback. And you talked about a team that doesn't really do a lot of that. And so, and if you're Chase, if you wait, to be honest with you, Jamar Chase probably has the best bargaining power the day after T. Higgins goes somewhere else next offseason. Because now they've already made a decision. And now you're like, well, it's not like you're going to turn around and say, oh, never mind, we'll trade you and we'll keep T. Higgins.
Josephus and Burton are going to be our 1 and 2,
Right. Yeah. And so like maybe things get really ugly here. They could say, well, look, we could get a ton for you in trade. And T. Higgins just had an awesome season. So we haven't done anything with Higgins yet. Maybe we like Higgins more. And we think it's better for our organization. So that's
we could get 2 firsts for Jamar Chase or something. Yeah.
So Jamar Chase, and I think it was smart to get those 2021 first-round wide receivers done early if you're the Eagles and the Dolphins too. So
yeah, they're good enough that it probably won't bite you. Chances are. Last nugget too is the Steelers are this way. I know some teams just do not negotiate during the season. I'm almost certain the Bengals are one of them.
Interesting times. And I think all of these wide receivers will be in eventually, whether they're playing out their current contracts or they have new contracts done. But we're getting close. Like these guys need to get in so they don't affect their season. And Nick Bosa last year was a holdout. He signed the week before the regular season started. And he said it hurt him and hurt his performance in the beginning of the year. He was not in midseason form when he needed to be. So it does affect you, even at positions like defensive end where you don't even need to worry about the timing with your teammates quite as much.
The only thing that worries me about Trent Williams, but it's not like he would have played 60 snaps in these preseason games anyways, but game 1, he's not going to rotate in and out. He's going to play 70 snaps, 60 snaps. Yeah, he
might be a little gassed if he pretty late. And,
he's a big fella,
fourth quarter. Right. Yeah. So, keeping
up with the cardio or not there, Trent,
Being in game shape and even practice shape is different than just kind of working out on the side on your own.
100%.
It's hard to replicate. Next, let's talk Seattle Seahawks first-time staff. It's a really young staff. And a question for you, Matt, about Drake London. And I know you're big on Drake London, so this is a big one for me. And what do we expect from Drake London in 2024? Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And these are the types of things that make FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because we got something special for you all, especially you football fans out there that are listening to this podcast, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket. Then with a YouTube TV based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sports book. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. How about... Well, we were talking wide receivers already, so let's get to this one. This question is to @Williamson NFL from @BD Peacock, and my
biggest fan.
Yeah, my main fantasy league is drafting Labor Day weekend, as a lot of fantasy leagues do. I have pick 1.1, and I'm pretty sure I know who I'm going to take at that slot. So I'm
maybe trying a 49er by chance.
I'm gonna go Christian McCaffrey. There's a lot of look, I'm in San Francisco. We're on the West Coast. We're in California. We've got a lot of 49ers fans in the league. I'm actually trying to dangle Christian McCaffrey in trade and get an extra pick in there somewhere and try to stay in that top 6-7 range and get another player. And because I don't want the responsibility of jinxing Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers fan base with Locked On 49ers, because I don't want they know that I'm going to draft Christian McCaffrey in 1.1, and if he gets hurt, it's going to be my fault. And he's got more touches, more carries than anybody in the NFL the last 2 years, played 40 games the last 2 years. That does worry me a little bit, but 1.1, you have to take it. And so that's my plan now currently. So I'm coming around at the turn, and I'm seeing the names there, and it's like, oh, okay, do we go? I'm usually wait on quarterback guy, but do I dive in with Josh Allen or something like that at the round 2-3 turn? But my biggest question here is a lot of times it looks like Drake London will be one of the top options for me there. Okay. And I am not a Drake London believer as you are. And his first 2 years have been like, he's fine, but I want a guy that I'm like, man, this guy's going to blow up and be a true wide receiver one. And his 800, 900 yards in his first 2 seasons, he's just got a tick light on the twitchiness for me to be like that sort of a player. There's a lot of mouths to feed there as well, because if you love Bijan, is there going to be enough for Kyle Pitts and Drake London? Like, I like the offense. I just don't know where to spend my fantasy dime in the Atlanta Falcons offense. So if I'm not mistaken, Matt, you're a big fan of Drake London this year. So sell me on him at that 2-3 turn if he's there.
Yeah. So this is more like general fantasy conversation, because I just got word last night that I'm picking second in one of my main leagues. And I don't think I'll get McCaffrey, but I'll probably take Tyreek over CD at 2. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to have these same conversations at 23 and 26, that turn, that 2-3 turn. And I'll be very honest, I don't like that area of the draft, period. I don't like the second round all that much. I don't see a lot of value. I don't see a lot of targets, and into the early third round. So I'm trying to trade that second slot to like 5 or 6 and do the hero running back and then just go receiver, end up with like Bijan or Brees. I can't quite pull the trigger on one of those two at 2, but to me, I mean, McCaffrey's an easy choice if I'm you, but I do understand your Locked On Niners, problem there. So looking at options at the end of the second, I think London's pretty suitable. Like my top 7 receivers kind of stand out. I go Hill, Lamb, Chase, Jefferson, St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson. And then I think it gets interesting. And I have London next.
A lot of people have Puka. You didn't have Puka in there. A lot of people have Puka in there. And as far as ADP goes, I love where Kupp is. So I'm all about Kupp this year.
Me too.
And I had Puka in my fantasy league last year, actually.
And he's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have Puka 13 and Devontae Adams 14. And I know people have those guys in this neighborhood, that 2-3 turn. I'm not quite there. So I'm picking from, in this order, London, Olave, Marvin Harrison, Neighbors, and Waddle.
Ooh, rookie. You're throwing the rookie.
Yeah.
Receivers in
the end of 2.
Okay. Because I look at the Dolphins offense, and even though Waddle's not the one, his numbers are still better than Drake London's were when Drake London was the one with the Atlanta Falcons. And so I kind of lean that way, because what happens if there's a Tyreek Hill injury and now you got Waddle in that offense? Now you're really humming. So I'm kind of looking at the high floor of already 3,000-yard receiving seasons. He had 100 catches as a rookie. Waddle did, right?
I know.
So he can be featured. He's got a little bit on every level of the defense. He can get down the field. He can give you something after the catch. It's dynamic in that offense, and wide receiver one upside with a potential injury to Tyreek Hill. Whereas I feel like I'm capped a little bit. So that's why me personally, I'm leaning towards a Waddle pick there, or even like a James Cook or something, or like Josh Allen over, I think, the floor versus ceiling of Drake London, where he might just be pedestrian. He might just be what we've seen in the last couple of years.
I hear you. Again, I don't love this neighborhood. I would not pull the trigger on a tight end or quarterback. There's just too many I like in mid rounds. That's just me. I like there's a lot of fish in that pool for me. As for Waddle, I just heard this today and it totally adds up, is if you look at his fantasy points per game, they're okay last year, but they're not great because he was dealing with a lot of injuries. But if you look at his fantasy points per route, they're like off the charts, because when he was out there, he was awesome. But there was a lot of times he'd like take a breather for a whole series or things like that because of injuries. So I think he's a little cheaper than he should be. As for London, as you can imagine with Arthur Smith now, the coordinator here, I watched a lot of Falcon stuff after that hire, and it blew me away how bad the quarterback play was, to be honest with you. Like, I thought the Steelers were bad at quarterback. Oh, man. I mean, like, they were in Atlanta, so many open receivers, including London, including Pitts, that were just missed, you know, and I love I still kind of call him a prospect. I love the prospect, the way he moves. It is a projection, but someone's got to be my wide receiver 8, and I don't feel strong about any of those 5.
It's definitely best. It's a tier, and in that spot, you're drafting the top of the tier rather than getting value from the bottom of the tier if they're all very, very similar. Kirk Cousins, though, he's not the worst quarterback to have.
No,
for a fantasy producer at wide receiver. He's done it multiple times, even going back to like Pierre Garçon in Washington. So that I like, and clearly that's a huge upgrade in Atlanta at quarterback, as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, and I could maybe live with Penix. You know, I mean, it's all better than last year.
So you mentioned you don't like quarterback. Let's go a little bit further on this fantasy conversation.
Okay. Yeah, we should talk a lot of fantasy in the next 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people preparing for their drafts probably have a lot of similar questions to this. You got me thinking, okay, if you don't like, say, early quarterback, early tight end, where is that sweet spot? Which players are you targeting in your leagues at quarterback and tight end, and in what round area?
So what I need to do more of, I have my lists here. I keep updating them every day, but I haven't done a lot of mocks to know exactly where people land. But I can tell you some quarterbacks that I'm higher on than most. Kyler Murray's my number 3. I mean, he produces such a high level when he's healthy, and now he has Harrison. Anthony Richardson was my 4. I've moved them to 5, just behind Mahomes. I know that's controversial. Well, he's always hurt. I really don't care if he gets hurt, because I can always find a quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make me crazy.
Yeah, you can pair like Anthony Richardson with Brock Purdy, and you can have a high floor and a high ceiling at the same time.
And it won't cost you that much, right? Yeah. Trevor Lawrence is my 13th. I know I'm way over market on him as well. So those are 3 that I bet I end up a lot with when I start doing mocks. Kyler, Richardson, Lawrence, if I'm going to wait.
A note on Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals that I was a little bit surprised about, because Kyler Murray has the profile of someone who's like, he's not going to be a tight end maker, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember Trey McBride's career started a little bit slow. Came on last year, and I was like, okay, well, when Kyler Murray came back, let me go see what Trey McBride did. And he was good. Like, he was flourishing with Kyler Murray at quarterback. And now, is that just because there's a lack of weapons outside? Is Marvin Harrison going to take away a ton of targets from Trey McBride? And McBride's going to slip a little bit because you have to spend on McBride. And so, but McBride's an interesting one. And I think what it just points to me is that he's got a middle of the field option. He's got a better outside option now, which just points the stock up for Kyler Murray.
Yeah, and I like their system. They've invested in the O-line. Even Michael Wilson is fine. You know what I mean? Like, I think there are going to be a ton of shootouts. I think that offense is vastly underrated, and the defense might be the worst in the league.
Yeah, and obviously he's got the legs and the ability to put some points on the board on the ground as well, and a bad defense, so they're going to need a lot of offense. So that's a combination for a pretty good fantasy quarterback.
If you just look at like fantasy points per game over the last like 5 years, Kyler's in the top 3 or 4. I mean, Josh Allen's probably 1. Hurts is high, but he might be ahead of Mahomes. Probably not Lamar. You know, I mean, like, he runs a lot.
Next, I want to talk about this Seattle Seahawks coaching staff. A great question here on how young the staff is, first timers everywhere, and can we fix the preseason, because it kind of got broken recently? Yeah, and we'll address the rest of this mailbag next. Today's episode of Peacock Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff. So they show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. And talk about, super deals, right? With when it comes to your NFL tickets, but you can go get tickets for Major League Baseball games, NFL and NHL when those start up, any sporting events, concert tickets, comedy shows, all of it. You can find it near you, and all in pricing. My favorite feature. I talk about it all the time at Game Time. You toggle on the all in pricing feature, shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Views from your seat, panoramic from your phone. You know exactly what you're going to get before you buy. So take all the guesswork out of buying concert tickets, NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Question here about the Seattle Seahawks this is from, where is this question? Now I lost the question about the Seahawks. Oh, yeah.
There's a good one.
It is right here. It's from Zach. At BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Here is a pitfall when you get to Seattle. So this is an interesting one, and we'll talk more about this when we get to the NFC West pitfalls. Most inexperienced staff ever, first-time head coach, first-time defensive coordinator, first time in the NFL offensive coordinator and O-line coach and special teams coordinator, and first year for John S. as the man without PC. I don't even know what that is. Okay.
Pete Carroll would be PC.
Okay, John Schneider.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. John Schneider, no Pete Carroll. So he's drafting for a new system offensively and defensively, even though, you really know what a head coach is looking for after working together for a decade. They do have Leslie Frazier, but could this be a disaster as far as growing pains for a lot of first-time coaches here in Seattle?
None of us know, of course, but I think it's a great conversation. It's something we all need to be aware of. I'm glad that he asked this question. Good work, Zach. From what I recall, weren't the Lions very similar? Like they had Deuce Staley and a bunch of former players, that were recent players, Antoine Randall L. And I think they were super young too. And they sure figured things out. So assistant coaches I always say is the hardest thing for us to comment on. But that being said, I kind of wish, I know Frazier's there, so that's one good thing. But kind of like in Tennessee, I'm glad Daddy Callahan is there. You know what I mean? Vic Fangio or, some grizzled old dude that has been a lifer would sure make me feel better that, maybe was a head coach at one time and failed, but they could bounce, assistant, some of the weird titles they give those dudes, assistant head coach or whatever. So I do think that there will be growing pains. I mean, anyone that does that job for the first time is going to screw it up some.
Yeah. And you look at Belichick, Pete Carroll himself, a lot of head coaches, when they do become great, it's not their first job either. So yeah, sure. You're betting that you got the right people. And if you got the right people, you're going to be okay, but it's probably not the ideal. You bring in the Leslie Fraziers, you bring in guys who do have some experience to try to help you out. And there's a lot of experience on the football team, and, your quarterback's experienced and a veteran, and his weapons, he's known for a long time and thrown to them. And so you kind of have some rapport there, but then you're trying to put veterans in a new system. Is that a little bit difficult? So yeah, there could absolutely be some growing pains. And I don't want to say that's, bleak, because I think they hired some really smart people.
Yeah.
You're rolling the dice there. You're just betting on these smart guys figuring it out.
I mean, it's not easy being a head coach. I mean, rookie head coaches in general, whenever we do our over-under win total show, I like going under on rookie head coaches. I mean, I just think clock management, dealing with the media, I mean, non-coaching stuff is hard.
Right. Rookie quarterbacks, rookie receivers, the hit rate is lower than you think. You expect everyone's always going to be really good and be their exact scouting report right away, and it takes some time.
100%.
Let's go to Naz, who I know we already have the Jerry Rice of question askers, Matt, but is this the Randy Moss of question askers? Naz has been coming strong with a lot of questions.
Real strong.
He's got a two-parter here on Anthony Richardson. Do you think Anthony Richardson has what it takes to be a top 10 quarterback in the league? Going further, if Anthony Richardson stays healthy for a full season, where do you see the Colts record being at the end of the year?
I think he can be a top 10 guy. And my tune has changed on this. Like when I was a scout, everyone believed this, and it was taught to me. No one gets more accurate at the NFL level. That just never happened. Never happened. It's harder now. I mean, I don't care if you played in the SEC, blah, 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 blah. Now it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, Josh Allen couldn't complete a pass. Dak Prescott wasn't accurate when he came in the league. There's many examples, and Josh Allen's the best one I could ever come up with. And my thoughts are, there's so many of these private quarterback coaches and biomechanics, and if you just change your footwork this much, you'll be this much more accurate. That didn't exist back then. So by all account, Richardson is smart and hardworking, and I'm sure he has a quarterback guru. So I think better accuracy will come. I have no idea if he can stay healthy or not. I mean, I know Naz listens, but the show, The Drive, we do on Steeler Nation Radio, my co-host and We Talk Fantasy won't touch Anthony Richardson, and I have him super high because he can't stay healthy, and I totally get it. But
and liking him in fantasy and liking him in real life is a little bit different too.
Exactly. Right. I'll just find, like I said, I'll draft Brock Purdy to be his backup, and if he gets hurt, then I won't start him that week. But if he stays healthy this year, I think that's a really hard offense to play against, even if his accuracy doesn't drastically improve.
I just remember watching him early last year and was really sold on it.
Yeah, me too.
Thought the timing was better than I would have expected for how inexperienced he was. It didn't feel like things were going too fast for him. He has ridiculous ability, and we've just seen recently, more times than not, having that elite level physical ability, athletic ability, arm, as long as you're smart and you're a coachable guy and things aren't overwhelming for you, you're gonna figure it out. And you're gonna be pretty good, and it might take some time. There might be some ups and downs this year, but I'd probably be buying the stock for Anthony Richardson.
If he's healthy all year, do they win 11 games, 10 games?
They're a 10-win team. Yeah,
I think they could win 10. Yeah,
absolutely. The problem is health too. That's probably the biggest question, because he's been hurt every time. He was hurt in college. He was hurt in his rookie season. So he's got to stay healthy. He's gonna be smart when he's running the football too.
I think but Naz asked if he plays 17, how many do they win? I'm going to say 10.
Yeah. If the over under 10, I'm taking the over.
Yeah. Hard to play against.
A lot of questions. That's a fun team, the Colts, man, because
they are.
If development is on pace, they're going to be good in a lot of places. And if it's not, they might be ugly.
Yeah, I think the offense has a chance to be really good.
Yeah, the floor ceiling there is very drastic difference. Let's finish it up talking about the preseason here as we get ready for the final preseason games. We got two separate questions on it. Joey Bag of Donuts says, aren't joint practices a way better way of practicing than preseason games? Seems like the joint practices are much more controllable. And Lucky says, do you think preseason games would benefit from special rules? Like only two halves, or there's already two halves, but I see what they mean. So 4 quarters, but every quarter functions like a postseason overtime. Starters have to play at least the first series. What could you change, and what would you try to enforce there to help preseason games along?
I'm open to having new rules, like maybe every quarter is like the end of a half, like they do that in the Senior Bowl so guys can get more 2-minute and things like that. I'm cool with that. Not forcing playing time in any way. I can't get behind that at all.
That's just not going to happen.
Not going to happen. But I'm open to changing rules. I mean, I think
here's my thing. Yeah. Instead of 2 preseason games, have the joint practices in the stadium and let us watch them, because I'd rather watch that anyway.
Yeah.
So there's your preseason games. They're joint practices now.
Again, last week I saw joint practices, Steeler Bills, and then 2 days later I saw the game, which was a hideous game. And I do believe, and the more that I've dug into it, that the joint practices took a lot out of the players, and there was much more that got done at joint practices, especially with the good guys. Like the 4th-string quarterback didn't get in the game in the joint practices. Josh Allen was out there slinging it. Like there was top dudes playing, because you weren't tackling to the ground, but it was really physical in the trenches and thud. But I thought the joint practices was much more beneficial than the game. And along those lines, like when we broadcasted from down there, and this is crazy, but every team's different. So like mini camp is not open to the public. So when we're on the air during minicamp, we can't say anything that happens right in front of us. Like one time someone blew out a knee and we couldn't even report it. So that's how this joint practice was supposed to be. But then the Steelers decided there's enough wives and guests and things that we were allowed to comment on it. So if it's open to the public, like training camp is for the Steelers, we can comment on everything. That's a great catch. So that's kind of the rules with that. So if they did open them to the public, sold tickets even, the public would enjoy it. And that's one of the reasons they don't, though, is they like to keep them closed because that's when there was some secret stuff that happened.
Or make a combo of things like, change the rules of the preseason so teams have control, so it's more beneficial for them to play more guys and actually work on things, and then do away with joint practices.
Yeah, right. You could put it in a stadium on TV or whatever too. Or
the league will be like, no, just like the kickoff thing. We're like, we need these preseason games to matter more. So guess what? You can't work on stuff in joint practices anymore. We're not going to allow that. So if you want to play against another team, practice against another team, you have to do it and tackle people during a preseason game.
But part of the issue is Buffalo had to get on a plane, come here 2 days earlier, practice, hang around for 2 days. I guess my buddy saw him at Top Golf, and then you got to go home. Like, you're not going to, you can only do so much on a road trip. You know what I mean?
Thanks to all the questions out there. Apologies to the questions we did not answer. I always get so many great ones every week. You can get involved in our mailbag. All you got to do is send us a question anytime at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL on Twitter, or drop a question in the YouTube comments. Make sure you subscribe while you are there. And we appreciate you guys making us your first listen. For your second listen, why don't you check out, talked a little fantasy football today. Check out the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast and Locked On Dynasty Podcast featuring one Matt Williamson. Get daily insight on the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your leagues this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Matt and I back tomorrow right here. Peacock and Williamson.